Silver is going to be absolutely critical, potentially for some of you, for your survival. And I don't want to be a doomsdayer because on the other side, I just see beautiful things happening, but not before some rocky roads ahead. And 2024 is going to be one of those years where
are we headed to new all-time highs for the gold price, for the silver price? There is so much going on right now. Is the dollar doomed? We have potential for runaway inflation. We have major changes going on in the world. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Mr. Daniel Tinkham. He's a wealth strategist and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to precious metals and these big changes that are going on all around us. You might feel a little crazy with everything going on, but by the end of this video, hopefully we'll provide you with some clarity. Daniel, welcome back to Ron's Basement.
Ron, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on again today.
Well, it's you're a basement favorite, and we truly do appreciate you giving us your time. I get a lot of messages. You know, you and I are talking right now, but we have a third person with us, our viewer, and I get a lot of messages from people saying things just feel crazy out there right now. Any thoughts on what you see when you look out at the macro environment? And of course, we'll at some point tie that all back into precious metals.
Absolutely. You know what I see, Ron? I see deception everywhere. There's constant, there's misinformation, disinformation, but not the kind that the mainstream media tells you. It's actually, they sprinkle a lot of truth in there and then they push it out. And it's really hard for people to discern what's truth and what's not truth. And so it really takes, each person to kind of take a step back, reflect, figure out, okay, who am I listening to? We were all there when we were watching mainstream media, myself included. And I said, you know what, I'm going to remove myself from that. And that was probably the best decision I ever made. And just seeking other truth seekers and, building your own ideas in your mind about what you think the world should be. And then taking action, taking small incremental steps to better your life. And if you can better your life, then you can serve others. And I'm at a point now where since about 2017, that's really when I changed my old ways. I personally found Jesus and then I started living a life that I was proud of through him. And for me, that's worked. But for every person, you're going to have a different spiritual journey. And whatever that journey is that was meant for you. For me, that includes stacking physical precious metals. I can see what the system has done because I've been behind the curtain. I was behind the curtain for a very long time. The old movie, The Wizard of Oz, OZ is ounces. Mm-hmm. So, and that yellow brick road was gold. Funny how they don't talk about silver that much in The Wizard of Oz, but silver is going to be absolutely critical, potentially for some of you, for your survival. And I don't want to be a doomsdayer because on the other side, I just see beautiful things happening, but not before some rocky roads ahead. And 2024 is going to be one of those years where all of a sudden you turn down a dirt road and it just rained and you go, oh boy, here we go. We're in for a bumpy ride. But if you've prepared your vehicle, you have, brand new tires, you're prepared, the roads, you'll get through it. I know you will, and I know your viewers will. Now, your viewers are going to be responsible for helping a lot of other people in the coming years. And, it very much seems that a lot of your viewers are givers as opposed to takers. And, so when those times do come, myself included, I'll be prepared to help others, the way God tells me to help them.
Yeah. And, it's, I think it's natural that we feel a little confused and crazy from time to time because we're not part of the mainstream. Most of us that are silver and gold enthusiasts, stackers, whatever we prefer to call ourselves, we are kind of digging in the dirt a little bit and trying to figure out what's really going on. And you referred to this kind of, make-believe land of the Wizard of Oz, what's going on behind the curtain. And I think that, when I think about just the dollar in general, I mean, the dollar has turned into like fantasy land, right? It's not backed by anything, but it was a lot different when the dollar was backed by gold and backed by silver. But now we've seen that change. We're also seeing some changes even with the petrodollar, because when they took the dollar off the gold standard, they kind of moved it to being backed by oil, but that's even changing now. Any thoughts on that whole scenario about what's going on with the dollar, the prospects for even more inflation down the road?
Ron, I'm sure you've played the game Monopoly, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers have played the game Monopoly. We're at the point in the game where the banker is just completely taken over and they're making all the rules and everybody is forced to play. And at some point, someone's going to pick up the board and just throw it. And I think that's going to happen next year. People are realizing that, like when you would run out of money in Monopoly, somebody would just write, 100 or whatever and try to pass it through the system. That's what's happening right now. I did a fun little game with myself. I searched the word trillion in my email inbox because I probably subscribed to about maybe 150 different publications, and I said, let's just see what's in here. And within a couple minutes, I found some pretty startling information. And this is probably a lot of your viewers are already familiar with this, but I'd like to cover like anything that I found that has a trillion in it, and pretty soon it's going to be quadrillion. We're talking about that with derivatives right now, but hopefully not in the not too distant future. We're not talking about quadrillions like we used to talk about billions, and now we're talking trillions. And like you've said, a trillion is a million. Well, a quadrillion is 10 million, and we're already talking about those numbers. So all we have to do is go back to Weimar Germany and figure out how many zeros we can add before the system breaks. But in terms of total household debt is at 17.29 trillion, and it rose 1.3% in Q3 alone. Mortgage balances 12.14 trillion. Credit card debt, this is startling, 1.08 trillion, with 1 in 10 borrowers in what's called persistent debt, meaning where the interest and fees that are accrued go up faster than the minimum monthly payment. That number was just in interest last year was 105 billion in interest last year at a 16% average rate. However, that number has picked up dramatically, and both with the increase in credit card debt and the increase in interest to average of 21%, but 25, 30% isn't out of the question for a lot of people. We're probably talking 200-300 billion just in interest. So this is going to quickly catch up, and I think Americans are living, the YOLO, you only live once. Running to the stores this year, shopping, buying whatever they can. I think people are at a point where they're just buying what they want to buy. Student loans, 1.6 trillion. And mind you, the federal government looks at student loans as an asset. It's the government's largest asset, go figure. So of course they don't want to change the system because, that's how they play the game. Auto loans, 1.6 trillion. And bear in mind, all these numbers are rising. They're not going down. No one's talking about it. Peter St. Onge recently came out and said that Germany's repatriation after World War I was the equivalent to adding 90 trillion to today's debt load. So from that standpoint alone, we're quickly getting to a point now where that number is already higher in the United States when you factor in federal debt, consumer debt, corporate debt, all the different forms of debt out there is, going to be well more. In fact, it's I had the figure up here, 307 trillion in total global debt, which is up 100 trillion since 2012. Fiat currency doesn't go to money heaven. It just gets redistributed. And, when people figure out that each individual creates their own money in this system. So if you can be the first one to spend that money, that's called the Cantillon effect, the Cantillon effect. And what that means is that the first person that brings new money into the system gets to reap the most rewards from that currency, which is why I'm not a fan of Dave Ramsey or paying down your mortgage, because you have to abide by the rules of the game. If the rules of the game were gold and silver, then yeah, pay down your debt, be the responsible one. And I was very blessed to kind of figure that out at a pretty young age that, just load up on debt. And as long as you can manage it, that helps build your credit score. And then as you build your credit score, the banks just want to throw money at you all the time when that's the system that we live in. And, people like Pat Holland that came on your show recently that said, hey, here's what you can do. You can go talk to your state legislatures and, have change the system, and I'm fortunate enough to live in New Hampshire. And I was actually going to put a challenge out to your viewers and give them some homework. I'd love to connect with Jim Forsyth of Citizens for Sound Money. Pat mentioned him, and I think he's doing fantastic work. But I really want to take this to the next level. So, if your viewers will reach out to Jim, I have a 10-ounce silver bar for him, just to talk to him and say thank you. So your viewers can reach him. It's Citizens, the number 4, so CITIZENS, the number 4, soundmoney.org. And I think that's going to be critical because other states are going to be looking at models to replicate. And I think Texas it's a good start, but I'm actually a proponent that every county should have a smaller depository and spread out the depositories across the state. Every state has blighted areas that need economic recovery. In New Hampshire, I would look at places like Berlin, New Hampshire, which is in Coos County. It's in a very depressed area. There used to be a paper mill there that shut down. One of the few major employers there is the state and the state prison. There's other places around New Hampshire like Claremont, which are very depressed. So I would kind of take it one step further and say that's great that we have this idea and this vision, but let's take it one step further and let's make it our own. I think most pensioners are aware that the system is very insolvent. New Hampshire has one of the worst pension systems. I mean, they're all pretty bad, but New Hampshire is exceptionally horrendous. And if these pensioners want to save their future wealth, then they should be demanding that these gold and silver bullion depositories be created, because in essence, they really should be created for the state, which is for the people. And so which is what the state of Texas did as part of the Texas retirement system. That's the whole reason the Texas Bullion Depository even was formed, because Texas was sick of paying BlackRock management fees for holding paper gold. So they said, well, screw that. We're just going to build our own bullion depository. And I think it's $1 billion or $2 billion worth of gold back into the Texas Bullion Depository. And a lot of that went for the pensioners in Texas. So we don't want this to be too late, because, as Andy Schechtman has said, it's, things are going, and then boom, it's just going to happen all of a sudden. And states need to really start that process now, sooner rather than later.
If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell him that you're from Ron's Basement. And Andy Schechtman likes to use the example of Jenga, that game where you stack up all the wood blocks and you keep pushing on, and then boom, it just happens suddenly. I want to circle back to something that you said earlier regarding the Monopoly game. The analogy I like to use is, if you and I and our viewer who's with us now and a few other guys got together to play a game of poker, and we all sit down and all of us brought $100 each, but you being Mr. Moneybags, show up with $100,000 to play poker, we're all going to be like, sorry, we're done. You talked about people just throwing the Monopoly board up in the air. And it feels like we could be getting, and not to go down the subject matter of wealth distribution in this country, but it feels like with the middle class struggling, everybody's struggling who's not part of the 0.5%, that people are growing very frustrated, and we could see some social issues erupting in the coming year as well. You also said something that fascinated me that I was not aware of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we know there's this massive amount of credit. There's a lot of debt, period, but we know, just if we zoom in on credit card debt, there's this massive record level of credit card debt now in this country. Right. And the consumer is 70% of the U.S. economy. I hear different, we're a consumer based economy. But you said that 1 in 10 people, and you had a specific term for it, were in a financial situation now with their credit card debt where the fees and interest were bigger than what they were paying on a monthly basis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but whatever you called it, I would call that a doom loop. That they're right. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah. The technical term is persistent debt, but yeah, a vicious doom loop. And unless something major happens, most of those people are going to eventually end up in some kind of default, unless they get bailed out by a parent, a family member, an
yeah,
inheritance, and the credit card companies rely on those, on the generosity of others, or, you spin the wheel, you get lucky once in a while. The credit card companies know if they issue, you know, 100 billion in what they view as bad debt, meaning they don't really expect to get any of it back, that eventually over time they'll collect 20 or 30 cents on the dollar through various ways, and and people's goodwill, and they want to, most people want to eventually settle their debt, as they should. Being in that
yeah,
mindset of just taking on debt and then not paying it back, that's not good. I've heard people say, oh, I'm going to buy uh, silver on credit card. That's a really bad idea.
yeah.
Unless we're at the point where, like Weimar Germany, where prices are doubling every day or something, which at that point, who knows if the credit cards will even work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the interest rates on credit cards are variable as well, right? So even if we do
Yes.
get into a, 50% interest rate environment, 60%, they can just keep adjusting those rates higher and higher on people.
Yep.
Not a pretty situation.
Not at
When
all.
we look out into the future, and we think about the silver and gold price, and we think about um, geopolitical worldwide changes that are going on. We have de-dollarization, which is generally, an accepted fact that that's occurring right now. The petrodollar situation as well. What do you think that we are entering a new paradigm or a new environment, both economically but also for the precious metals right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's and I saw that fundamental shift, believe it or not, in mining stocks. And I like watching mining stocks because it gives me a very good indication as to where we're at in the cycle, because there's these periods of exuberance and then these periods of just very long depression. There's no
Yeah,
other way to put it, as you know. And maybe I'll start a money management service. I don't know. I have a knack for it. I use it, for my own personal self. I use kind of a three-prong approach. I use fundamentals, I use technicals, and then I use my own intuition. So I've actually been sitting on the sidelines for quite a while, and I actually pretty much, I won't say all in, but I made significant investments in precious metal stocks, including First Mining, for full disclosure, on October 26th, which, as of right now, that seems to have been pretty good timing. And I think we hit a bottom, and the sentiment got to a point where I think I read something that the top two stocks, I think it's Microsoft and maybe Google,
yeah,
just those two market caps were 70 times the total of all of the mining stocks, all the value in all the mining stocks. What world do we live in? That makes no sense at all. And so I
Another
mean and
another
that's my intuition talking.
Well, and another statistic that I've heard in regards to this, and as it relates to the silver and gold price and sentiment with the miners, is that the entire market cap of the precious metals mining sector worldwide was smaller than Home Depot, which blew me away. And I agree with you. The sentiment had reached a horrific state. It seems like now, I guess it's almost been a month ago, but that does matter for the actual prices of the metals as well, in my opinion. To me, it's one of the best barometers that we have regarding how people feel about precious metals. And I talked to a lot of the CEOs, and they all said the same thing. Like, we thought it couldn't get worse a year ago, but it did get a little worse even. But like volume on the Toronto Stock Exchange, where many of these mining stocks are traded, was at like 20 or 30-year lows. There were like no IPOs during the year, which was like a record of all time. So, I think the good thing I'm going to get your opinion on this, Daniel, because this is something that excites me, and I think probably our viewers as well, because they're all, investors to one degree or another in either the metals or the mining stocks. Is that if we look at gold, and as we record this on Tuesday morning, November 28th, gold is above $2,000 per ounce. That we are within a stone's throw of a new all-time high for gold. If we get a new all-time high, it just blows my mind. If we get a new all-time high in the gold price, and we do that with this sentiment that we currently have, what happens if we get just the slightest improvement in sentiment?
First Mining Gold is a development company advancing two of the largest gold projects in Canada. Springpole in Ontario and Duparquet, located in Quebec, each already has 5 million ounces of gold reserves, but exploration initiatives are underway at both projects to find even more gold. First Mining is well financed, has zero debt, and owns an interest in 4 additional Canadian gold development projects.
The technicals actually drive a significant amount of the market right now, and specifically computer algorithm trading. And I've listened to multiple people, and they've pretty much all said if we get past 2100, these technical indicators are going to tell the computers to just start buying like mad.
Yeah.
And that's so essentially what we're seeing is an unheard of potential quadruple top. We've already seen a triple top in gold, but we're going to hit a quadruple top, and then it's just going to either be new all-time high, or they're going to try to smash the price down again. Every time they smash the price down, they're using ammunition behind the scenes through the New York Fed's Emergency Stabilization Fund. And there comes a point where they're only going to have so much ammunition before they say, okay, it's time to pull out the big guns. And that's when they start printing 5 trillion, 10 trillion. And then where does the price? I mean, they're stuck. They're stuck between a literal rock and a hard place, because they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And but the key here is more people need to wake up to what they're doing, what the game is, and then how to fight. And you can fight by just buying physical precious metals, by buying mining stocks, talking to other people about it. And nothing gets, all these traders more excited than seeing returns. And, some of the returns I'm seeing 20 or 30% in the last 30 days, which that doesn't happen forever. There'll be I actually prefer to see corrections and then have things go up more slowly. When you see these parabolic rises, I forget who said it, but someone said if you see a 45-degree angle in a stock, it's probably fraud. So when you get these massive spikes, they're really not natural in a lot of ways. But for something like silver, we really need to kind of stay above 30 for multiple days, but I don't think we're going to get there until gold is consistently over 2100. Now, when gold gets to 2101, it's game on, and then that's when the algos will start buying, and that's when silver will really take off. I think silver will just smash through 30 at that point. And really there's very little resistance from 30 up to right around 45. And then you'll start to see people starting to sell then. But totally different dynamic than where we were back in 2011, 2012. Totally different.
Yeah. And you know much more about this than I do. So I want to circle back again to something you said, because I've heard other people say this as well, that we are approaching what's called a quad top. Is that the term you used in the gold price? Or that's the fourth time, basically. This will be the fourth time that gold attempts to break through, let's say, the 2100 range. Correct. And that triple tops are very unusual, and quadruple tops are almost unheard of. That meaning that if it gets up there again, statistically speaking, it should keep going.
Yeah, I mean, typically in technical terms, a double top is usually pretty well defined, especially after it plays out. But to see a triple top and then potentially this quadruple top is just it's unprecedented, and it's something that everybody should be watching very closely, because we're at a point now where the whole economic system is about to break, but no one knows how it's going to break. I think a lot of people just intuitively know something's really wrong, something really big is about to happen, potentially something very breaking very bad, but we don't necessarily know exactly what it is.
how about the demise of the petrodollar? How about record money printing? Like we know, and I hear, not to go back to Andy Schectman. Andy Schectman says, there's crumbs and hints all around. They're never going to tell us what's wrong. We know there's a ton of garbage. You have not even talked about the banking sector. I heard Lynette Zhang say this the other day, that these banks have they're hiding a ton of garbage, right? I mean, I'm an accountant. The
Well, you know how
banks.
they you know how they
Go ahead.
hide it through
Mm-hmm.
Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yeah.
That when that got pushed through in '02, and mind you, who was the main architect of that was none other than Andrew Weissman, who single-handedly shut down Enron and Arthur Andersen. And they've been able to essentially lock out the big players at by basically making them pick one of the major four
Mm-hmm.
auditing companies, and then from there it's a black box. No, no one
Yeah.
gets in. Everything's compartmentalized. Even if you work at those institutions, you're highly compartmentalized to a specific division, or you're focusing on some certain mutual fund. It's very few people have kind of the big picture on what's going on behind the scenes. But a lot of those accounting firms are hiding a lot of skeletons. But they're big enough where they can take on the IRS, and they just bog down the IRS until the statute of limitations runs out.
Yeah. Yep. I heard a term, and this was 15 years ago, right after the financial crisis, that described what was going on at the banks, and I think it's even going on more so now, as Disneyland accounting. Make believe we don't have to. We'll hold these treasuries that we're down 44% on. We're going to hold them till maturity, so we're not going to recognize that we're in the hole. I mean, it would be like you or I, as the head of our households, making a bunch of bad investments and losing 40-50% of our wealth and on paper, right? And saying, well, it's okay because I'm going to hold it forever. And eventually, I mean, the troubles are there. And with the banks, it's even more pronounced. And I know we're not going to go into a deep discussion about banks, but people, the depositors think that money is there, and in many cases, whether it's commercial real estate or treasury, it's not. I mean, if
It's
they
not.
went and
Yeah.
asked for, it's gone. Yeah.
And they play by different rules. It's rules for thee and not for me is how the banks look at it. So it would be one thing if everyone played by the same rules, but more and more people are waking up to the fact that they don't play by the same rules. And when you make a deposit at any commercial bank, um, you're turning over your currency to them. Now it's a liability, so now they owe it to you, and they're going to go lend it out 7, 8, 9 times over because of banking rules. They don't have to keep much, if any, on hand. And the Fed has just perpetuated that, taking in collateral at 100 cents on the dollar and then loaning them money for a year. Well, guess what? It's been a year. So a lot of these banks come next March. I think that's when they made a lot of the loans, was last March when First Republic and Silicon Valley went down. But if you recall, they basically between March, April, May, maybe June, they were giving these banks all these different loans at 100 cents on the dollar. Well, those are going to come due next year.
Mm-hmm.
And we have I'll jump back into the trillions again because I think it's kind of fun. So there's 17.34 trillion in commercial bank deposits, which is really a liability. And of that, we're looking at 128 billion that's in the FDIC fund. So there's $8 for every 1,000 of insured deposits. We've spent 7 trillion on never-ending wars to feed the military-industrial complex. 8 trillion in maturing U.S. Treasury bills and notes between now and 2025. And yeah, so when you ask about inflation, someone I heard, Tavi Costa, he talks about the 3-wave inflation theory. I think we're definitely either about to hit the second one or potentially even about to hit the third one. So we're kind of in this relative calm. But as soon as the money printers start going, it's kind of a case of, okay, who, when they print money, who gets it? Everybody, everybody ultimately gets it. It's just a matter of who and when.
Mm-hmm.
And, when that happens, that's when the cost of goods is, you're going to go to Home Depot or you're going to go to the grocery store and you're just going to give up. You're going to be like, Yeah, so so preparing your home now though, because that's when gold and silver are going to really take off. Because at that point, um, the genie's out of the bottle. There's no hold. I personally, in my opinion, there's really no holding it back at that point. I don't know what kind of tools the Fed says they have that they can uh, quash the price of gold and silver again. Could they? Maybe, but you know, the men at the Alamo, they died trying, right? So I mean, we gotta try, and if that means you're in the red for a little while, then you just have to have that psychological mindset of a general to hang on and keep fighting. And to me, the gold and silver is the best way to fight. Um, if they want to keep printing money, I think next year some people might be at the point where, like Jesus talks about, what if he wants my tunic, take my tunic. If they want to do reparations and start printing money, okay, go ahead and print money, see what happens. All these MMT people, we can fight and fight and fight. But there may come a point where we might say, you know what, if we just let them print whatever money they want, then maybe we get that much closer and people will quickly recognize. We also need effective tools such as bridge for asset-backed digital currency. It's not a CBDC. CBDC is central bank digital currency. So you want to get your terminology correct. ABDC is an asset-backed digital currency. So I would prefer to see states issue them through the bullion depositories. So if I were running a treasury, I would want to have digital gold, digital silver that's custodied, and issued by a certain state. Because I think that's really the only way, and you can fight these tyrants. And listening to you and Pat Holland, I actually agree with him in the sense that the federal government is this five-headed hydra that is just almost impossible to take down. It's literally the remnants of Satan. And how do we fight it? Well, it's by the states, because the government is supposed to be we the people, and we've usurped that and given our rights away to other people who are then squandering them. So we need to take that back. And I do believe that states do have a very effective role. If Missouri is a state that is known as, rock solid, it's a place you can trust, or there's another asset-backed digital currency option in the state of California. Do you think anyone's going to buy that one? If Governor Newsom is still in office, I don't think anyone's going to go with that. So it's up to individuals within the states to push the legislation to get these bullion depositories. And it doesn't have to be this monstrosity, like I mentioned before. I mean, Texas spent hundreds of millions of dollars. It's an absolutely massive facility, but these facilities can be smaller in nature and designed for the needs of the people. It should be designed for the people in that state. And then if other people want to join in, then well, that's great. Because then we can, just like a toll, you can collect additional toll. And New Hampshire is actually, one of the most favorable states when it comes to banking laws and trust laws. We're far better than Panama when it comes to helping people hide wealth from tyrants. Other states include South Dakota, Nevada. So there's a handful of states out there that do a very effective job at helping people shelter assets. And whether that's good or bad, I mean, that's the system that we live in, but ultimately it is up to each state. So if inflation does go crazy, but most of the people in the state of New Hampshire either have gold or silver in some form, or they have a pension that they can get paid in gold and silver. I think a lot of your viewers that are collecting pensions would love that, because if their social security the value of their social security goes down every single year, because the cost of the COLA, cost of living adjustment, is always less than what real inflation is. And we know real inflation numbers through places like shadow stats. So if pensions can help protect their people, which is what it's supposed to do, that'll go a long way towards fighting these tyrants.
Yeah.
And sorry, that was a little long-winded, but I felt like that needed to come out.
Yeah, well, it's I think the only potential way for the current system to be perpetuated is by inflating away the debt. And that's certainly a good thing for the value, right? The real value of precious metals. It feels like to me that we're at a point in time where the hens have come home to roost, right? Where mathematics shows no forgiveness on the altar of truth. I love that saying. And I want to ask you one last question. It feels like to me over the last 50 years, this Wizard of Oz fantasy scenario that we've seen play out has worked because the United States enjoyed this hegemony position in the world. We were the world power, right? I mean, we were in a very favorable environment for the United States of America. And it feels like to me, if I just could limit it down to the last 3 years, that we've seen some real fundamental shifts. So when we look out at the next 50 years, and that we're now starting with this unbelievable, all this debt that you outlined for us, right? And we're starting with political chaos in this country, and we're starting with what feels like social chaos in this country. That the next, I don't want to be a doom and gloomer, but it feels like the next 50 years aren't going to be anything like the last 50 years.
For some states, I view it as every state's going to have an opportunity to make a stand against this federal government and to decide what they want for their people. So there, in 50 years from now, there's going to be some states that are going to look like Venezuela, and there's other states that are going to look like Qatar, small country in the Middle East with vast amounts of wealth. I mean, why can't New Hampshire be a bastion of freedom? Even if, Massachusetts is withering away into oblivion because they don't know how to treat their people nicely, and people want to move to New Hampshire instead, and they bring their gold and silver, and we can live prosperously while they live, in decay. Then who's stopping that other than we the people? So, I see a world that's bifurcating. The federal government is most likely going to hyperinflate away its debt. It always takes longer than people think. In looking back in history, we can always look back and say, well, that's taking longer, but we're at the point now where 2024, I think, is going to be a massive year, lots of change. And, for me and my clients and anyone willing to listen, investing in, places like oil, which I work for an oil and gas exploration and production company. So I wanted to align myself where the future cash flow could be denominated in, digital gold, digital silver, or an easy mechanism to say, hey, would you like your dividend? You're going to get your dividend in dollars, but you can easily exchange it into digital gold and silver. Most companies aren't going to have that ability to do that. Like a retailer is unless they're collecting gold and silver, which they're probably not. A lot of industries are going to be challenged by that. But if you buy energy stocks, it could be public companies, it could be private companies. If they start accepting, if they're selling their oil and gas to market and they're accepting gold, as Zoltan Poznar has said, the exchange mechanism of 1 gram of gold for 1 barrel of oil, or the price could be different depending on the country. So if Russia says, yeah, we'll sell United States gold for and it's going to be 3 grams per barrel.
Right.
If New Hampshire's sitting there saying, well, we have plenty of gold, sure, we'll buy some. It's whatever we make it, out to be. Yeah, ultimately, we'd love to fix the federal government, but it's gotten so large. No one really has a grasp of like how big this thing actually is, and that's my biggest issue. And if we can take control of our own personal economies, that's really the best way out of this. And then if same thing with Missouri, if you and Pat and everybody else is saying, look, here's the lifeboat, and you're throwing the raft to them and you're saying, look, get on, let's go. Eventually people are going to be kind of looking around, and then they're going to say, oh, well, Susie, my neighbor, she's doing that, and they're doing, and then before they know it, now if they hear it enough times, they're going to be running. And
right.
We want 2024 to be that year where they're all running to the life raft. So that's
because now I think sometimes to a certain degree, we can be perceived as the little boy who cried wolf, right? Like, oh, but yes, at some point, if things change, right, and the boat's only so big. I like to use the analogy of just look back to the March, April little banking crisis that we had that they papered over very quickly and conveniently. You in St. Louis, you couldn't go to a coin shop and find any silver, and they were telling you you'd have to wait 3 or 4 weeks. The other thing I want to throw in there is I feel like I'm preparing, right? You and I are out with our binoculars looking out into the future and like, oh, that doesn't look so good. But even at the same time, I can still in the present moment still, function normally in this society and have a good life, but at the same time be preparing, right? It's not like it's one or the other. It's, hey, we're doing good, we're having a good, but I want to make sure that I feel like, what I believe is to be prepared for what might be coming.
Everybody's going to have a different level of preparedness. There is no one shoe fits all approach. You know, as I was a financial advisor for a long time, as you know, and I got rid of my Series 7 because I felt it was more of a burden and I couldn't say what I wanted to say. But, people really need to start taking the initiative and assessing their own situation, as opposed to someone's trying to sell you something. Oh, buy all this food for 25 years. Well, you can only have so much food for 25 years unless God is telling you buy a warehouse and store food because I need you to. He's only going to call specific people to do certain things. And, I recently came to terms with that where, I felt the Spirit of the Lord over me, and he said, you've prepared enough. Now just kind of live it out and be a teacher to others.
Yeah.
So everybody, somebody might have been prepared 2 years ago and said, yep, I got my bunker, I got my food, I got my private well, I got, solar, whatever the case is, whatever God's telling you to do. Okay, I'm fully prepared. Now I can go out and help others. And that's when and that's where I'm at this point, is helping others. But yeah, well, Missouri will be okay. New Hampshire will be okay. Some states I'm much more concerned with than others. But I think at the end of the day, when there's a crisis, you see the best in people.
You're a wealth strategist, and I put links up to your website, danieltinkham.com, several times now during the video on the bottom of the screen. As part of preparing by buying real assets, things like silver, gold, you're also involved with an oil and gas exploration company, King Operating.
Yes.
What's the situation with that opportunity?
Yep. So I work for King Operating. We're based out of Dallas, Texas. We're in the production or exploration and production of oil and gas. We have multiple basins of focus. We've already raised $125 million this year, and the fund will close once we raise $200 million. Really from that standpoint, we're, because of government regulations, we're only allowed to work with accredited investors, meaning your net worth is at least $1 million or more, excluding the value of your primary residence, or if you're single and you make $200,000 a year for the last 2 years, or if you're married filing jointly and you make $300,000 a year over the last 2 years, then the SEC says, okay, now you're allowed to invest. And even things like that, it frustrates me, but I can see the point in protecting investors. But at the same time too, if someone wants to put a little bit of their allocation in, I have to tell people all the time, sorry, you can't invest because the government tells me you can't. But those are the rules we live in. But yeah, we're projecting 8 to 12% annualized returns paid monthly from our monthly passive income. And and there's also a significant tax write-off as well. So from that standpoint, if anyone is interested, I can go through the presentation and send you the PPM. So the two ways to contact me, either through the website, danieltinkham.com. So it's DanielTinkham.com. You can also, if you just want to email me directly, it's info@danieltinkham.com. I'll also provide the phone number for King Operating. So if you're the kind of person that says, you know what, I would rather just pick up the phone and talk to someone, you can call King Operating. Our assistant will answer, and even if it's just, hey, I saw Dan, he did a great job, or whatever you're compelled to do, or if you're interested in learning more about our program that way, King's phone number is 214-420-3000. That's 214-420-3000.
Okay, and they call oil black gold, right? So I imagine that if we do go into this environment where we see further deterioration in the value of the dollar, and maybe we have some more inflation, that likely we could see higher oil prices and potentially even higher returns for any company that's in the domestic oil and gas production arena.
Yeah, so that, that's the goal right now. So one of our projects is in the Permian Basin. We have multiple wells drilled, all have hit oil. Our goal is to do 20 wells in that program. And our goal is really simple. Our model is simple. It's we acquire, we develop, and we divest. So, I like analogies. Instead of tenants and toilets, it's oil and gas. So we're doing a lot of the same, from an analogy standpoint, we're doing a lot of the same as if you bought an apartment building and you fixed it up, you did some structural work to it, fresh carpets, fresh paint, windows, boom, now you get higher cash flow and the property is worth more. We're doing the same thing. We're going into underappreciated areas in neighborhoods with old wells that are 20, 30 years old. But instead of refacing them or reworking them with the bore well, which is essentially a company that comes in, they don't have enough capital, so they try to come in and, kind of like if you found a bone with some meat on it and you're trying to pick away at whatever meat you can. We believe that this area in particular has a lot of meat left on the bone, so we're coming in with advanced technology such as 3D seismic, which is essentially it's like an MRI and an X-ray on the land. We have land engineers, we have petroleum engineers, we have one of the best teams out there trying to strategically find the right places to drill. And then we're using the most advanced technology fracking. We're doing horizontal. This is a major, in terms of the size, this is one of the largest that I know of that is allowing retail investors to participate. If anyone knows of another retail focused fund, for accredited investors that has raised 125 million, please let me know because I don't know. Most of these are institutional only. These sorts of deals, are typically reserved for billionaires. But our founder, Jay Young, believes in the model. We've already proved the model to work where we can try to flip it within a few years. And in the meantime, while you sit on it, just like if you had an apartment building and you're collecting that monthly rent from the tenants, while you sit to wait for us to flip it, you're getting that monthly cash flow from the price, from the sale of oil and gas. If the price of oil and gas goes up, your cash flow is going to go up. And then we also have teams that are going to be watching the markets closely. And if things really start to break down, trying to find mechanisms to potentially pay our investors in digital gold or digital silver, as opposed to currency, just the fiat currency. And that's not imminent, but that is something that, the executive team behind the scenes is starting to look at. So we want to be pioneers in the industry, and if we're doing something a different way, there's other copycats that we've already heard that are trying to come in and do something similar. So I'd imagine if we started paying dividends in digital gold and silver, I would imagine there would be lots of copycats, which is kind of what we want. that would be a compliment. But of course, there's always risks involved with any project. So always do your due diligence, and and like I said, each person that reaches out will provide the PPM, which is all the fine print.
Sounds good. I guess you said they're pioneers. I just want to be real clear here. They're always welcome to come to St. Louis and do some drilling here in my yard if they
yeah.
maybe do the seismic work first. No, on a serious note, sounds like a very interesting opportunity. Daniel, on behalf of everyone who's joined us today, you're a wealth of knowledge and very generous with your time. Again, I'll put the links to how you can get in touch with Daniel in the description of this video, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time.
My pleasure. And again, you guys don't forget to reach out to Jim Forsyth. I have a 10-ounce bar for him when we are able to meet up, and I'd love to have a discussion with him about how I can help advance New Hampshire's interest, as I'm a lifelong resident. I grew up in East Area, New Hampshire, about 5 miles from Alan Shepard's house, same town as Robert Frost. So deep roots here in New Hampshire. This is my home. I'm never leaving. I will die in my house if I have to stand against this tyranny. So I am more than happy to advance New Hampshire's best interests, and happy to help anyone who's doing the same thing.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dan. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ron. It's a pleasure.